What's up, everybody? David Wilson here, back again for another stream to live code some Emacs configuration. Last time we got a very basic configuration set up to basically just make Emacs UI bearable and more minimalistic and nicer looking. So I figured this time what we'll do is focus on some more helpful UI enhancements that will give us a better perspective into what's happening inside of Emacs and how, what configuration points we might have and what key bindings we have, etc. That way, whenever you're using Emacs on a day-to-day basis, you will have more information at your disposal to configure it however you like and figure out how to use it. So if you are here in the chat, feel free at any point to say hello or ask questions or make suggestions, etc. Last time in the stream, we had a lot of really good suggestions and a lot of points that people brought up that were really helpful. So please definitely contribute to that if you are interested at any point. So let's see. One thing I would like to remind you of is that I have put the source code for the configuration that we've been working on in this folder on my GitHub account. It's github.com/davidwill/runemax. If you check out the README, I've added a lot of information here that might be helpful to you for how to basically set up Emacs configuration on your system, on your particular operating system, and as well as one of the things I suggested last time, which was to replace caps lock with control on your system. There's a way that you can remap that in pretty much every major operating system. I find that to be a very big improvement to my day-to-day keyboard usage, because at least I can use pinky on the home row instead of having to bend it down to control at the bottom row. So I highly recommend trying that if you are going to get serious about using Emacs in your day-to-day life, because it might actually save you some hand pain. But you can see what we left off with from last time on the init.el file, which is sort of the main one you would want to look at there. So that's basically the starting point we'll have today. So I think the first thing that we'll try to do is, let me drop into, I'll split this window real fast so we can see both things at once. My computer is running a little bit slow thanks to OBS today, so if you notice any lagging, it's just because my CPU is being eaten. So I made a handy little startup script here to help me start up Emacs without pulling in stuff from my own system configuration. You won't be running Emacs like this whenever you run it on your system. You'll just be running Emacs using the desktop launcher or running it from the command line. But for my purposes, when you see me running this run emacs.shell, it's basically just so that I can run Emacs without any kind of contamination from my local system. So let's just pull that up again and full screen it. And then we'll use ControlX. Actually, let me start the thing we were using the last time, the CLM toggle command log buffer. I think we need to set global command log mode. Hi, Spud Leo. Yes, Emacs Pinky is a real thing. You won't really know that it's happening until it's too late, and then you will regret ever using your Pinky on the lowest keys. Okay, so let me hit ControlX. Oh, why did this go away? Let me pull that window up again. CLM open command log buffer. There it is. Okay, so we're pulling up our handy command log buffer so you can see what key bindings that I'm hitting at any given point. And I'm gonna hit ControlX. Oh man, every time I hit escape, it disappears. This is what's happening. Let me see if I can avoid hitting escape. That's really hard for me to break that habit. All right, ControlX, Control-F to do find file, and I'm gonna say init.el. And then it says we have autosave data. I don't think that we do, so I'm going to ignore that for now. So let's see. I think I have some notes as well that I'm going to follow for this, because it's kind of helpful to be a little bit prepared. So if I pull up my Emacs 02. All right. That's not the right one. All right, here we go. So first of all, we're going to start with some general improvements to the UI. One thing that you might notice in this screen is that we don't actually have the line numbers on the buffer, which is kind of helpful if you are trying to navigate your way around a file. So one thing we're going to do is turn on line numbers in our buffers. But first, I'm going to answer this question from Billy Grand. Hello, David. Can you make live chat replay available for this video and the next ones? Yes, it is turned on. So if you don't see it, let me know after the video is recorded, especially if you don't see it on the previous stream, because it's supposed to be turned on. So I will make sure of that. So turning on line numbers is a pretty straightforward thing to do. What I'm going to do is pop back over to my own... Oh, I'll pop back over to my notes because I think I actually stored this here. So I'll just copy this little snippet and then throw it into the configuration. And at some point here, I'm going to have to start organizing this a little bit better because just dumping configuration into an eList file is not the most effective way to do things. So in Emacs, there is a mode that you can turn on to enable line numbers. And this is actually something that's fairly new. I believe that in Emacs 25, I want to say, there wasn't a built-in line number feature. And there was like an external package called linnum mode that you had to use. But then I believe someone added a built-in package that's way better because it solves some issues with the UI getting shifted around in weird ways and performance issues with line numbers. So now we have a nice shiny built-in mode that we can use for this. And that mode is called Global Display Line Numbers mode, or Display Line Numbers mode. We're going to turn it on globally because in most cases you're going to want to see line numbers in a file because you're going to be editing text files. So we can just go ahead and hit that here. If I hit ControlXE, then you'll see that I get line numbers on the side. And as we've seen before, you can live evaluate your Emacs configuration to make things happen in real time. So that's pretty nice. You all might also notice that in the mode line, we see what line we're on. We see we're on line 42 right now, but we're not seeing what column we're on. So we can use this column number mode also to help us to keep track of our column number. So I'm going to hit ControlX, Control-E on that, and now we can see that we see the column down here as well. So like I said, in most cases you're going to want to see line numbers, but in some buffers you don't want to see them at all. For instance, like if you have a terminal mode buffer, so if I were to pull up shell mode, shell mode, this will start a shell in a buffer. Oops, actually I just ruined this buffer. Give me 1 second. So I need to go back to Emacs list mode. I'll have to explain modes at some point because that's a kind of interesting topic. And once again, I lost my open command log. Okay, I'm really gonna fix some things here in a second because it's starting to get annoying. So I did it again. Let's leave that off for now. So I was going to run shell. I think it's shell? Yeah, shell. So I can do ls-al here in shell. We've got like basically a built-in shell buffer inside of Emacs, and you can see there's the line numbers here, and we don't really want that in a terminal buffer. At least I don't, because I find it to be kind of noisy and useless. So I will kill this buffer. I wonder if I actually have. I really need to have that open, so let me get rid of that. I will pull up CLM open. And I will try again not to hit escape. So yes, so what we can do here to make sure that for shell buffers or any other buffers that we want to ensure that the line numbers don't show up is we can set a hook on that mode. So I will go into a slight digression into modes. Emacs, a lot of the functionality in Emacs is centered around the concept of a mode. A mode is basically a collection of functionality. So it's like some functions and some variables that may configure the functions that are executed, and some hooks that all sort of work together to provide some type of functionality. So whenever you have a mode, like let's say shell mode, you can activate that mode by running the function called shell mode. And what that will do is kind of attach a bunch of functionality to Emacs by like attaching to hooks. And what a hook is basically a variable that holds a list of functions. And a hook has a particular behavior, I guess. It happens at a certain time. So maybe like whenever a particular mode gets activated, there's a hook for that mode being activated. So you can add certain functions that get executed when a mode gets activated. So for instance, if we want the line numbers to be turned off anytime a shell mode buffer is active, then we would try to add a hook to the shell mode hook. And if I use the describe variable ControlH v command, then I can type in shell-mode-hook, and we can see the description of this. It basically says shell mode hook is a variable defined in shell.el. It's a hook for customizing shell mode. So this is something we would add a function to say whenever shell mode starts up, let's do this thing. And in our case, what we want to do is call this display line numbers mode 0. So usually whenever you have a mode in Emacs, there is a function for that mode name, so display line numbers mode. And that function will take a parameter of basically like a true or false value. So you can call it with no parameters and it will basically toggle the mode. But if you call it with a 1, it will turn the mode on. If you call it with a 0, it will turn the mode off. So what we're trying to do here is call display line numbers mode 0 to turn off the display line numbers mode. And basically what this little snippet does, it says for each of these modes, so we're iterating over this list of modes. For each of these modes in this list, we're going to call that variable mode. We're going to call the add hook function, which basically adds a hook function to a hook variable. We're going to say add the hook that's stored in the variable mode, and we're going to give this hook a lambda function, which is basically an anonymous function that just exists right here in this context. And we're going to call display line numbers mode 0. So if I evaluate this, what's going to happen is that we're going to add this lambda that calls display line numbers mode 0 to all 3 of these hooks. And if I go look at term mode hook, which probably is the same one for shell mode, we'll see in a second if I'm right or wrong about that. Let's look at term mode hook. So now you can see in term mode hook, it says its value is lambda nil display line numbers mode 0. So that's another thing that's really useful about Emacs help functionality is if you want to see what functions are attached to a hook, like if you've got some weird functionality that's happening whenever you're turning on a particular mode, or maybe like there's some hook that you know about in Emacs and like there's some weird thing happening, you can go to the help for that function, or for that mode, and look at what things are attached to it. You can also obviously do that by evaluating the variable. So if I were to run Shift-Alt: you can see in the bottom in the mode line, or sorry, in the mini buffer, I get an evaluation prompt. I can say term mode hook there, and then it will tell me the same thing, lambda nil displayed line numbers mode 0. So there's a few different ways that you can get information about what hooks are attached, which will probably be helpful to you as you try to learn how to configure Emacs more completely and also diagnose issues that you run into. Okay, so let's actually try that now. If I run shell mode, maybe I should run term mode. It's basically the same thing, term mode. No, I'm sorry, term. Let's run term and not term mode. And now you can see I don't have line numbers, and I kind of feel like if I was to run shell mode, it wouldn't also. Let's see, shell. Okay, shell, oh no, shell does have it. So let's just fix that right now. Let's say shell mode here, just to prove that it worked. Shell mode hook. Now you may be thinking, okay, if I run this again, isn't it going to add the same hook more than once on the existing hooks? Yeah, it's going to do that, but we don't really care about that right now. But the same thing to be aware of, whenever you're running these functions, like if you have some snippet in your Emacs code or your Emacs configuration code that you're evaluating multiple times, you may end up with cases where you are adding the same hook multiple times. So you've got to be aware of that whenever you're messing around with your own configuration. So let's run CLM open command log buffer again, because I keep closing it by accident. I'll pull it over some. I will execute this code, and then I'll run shell. Now you can see in shell mode, we do not have line numbers anymore. So that's just a nice little thing to learn about for Emacs configuration. So moving on to the next thing, another nice little general addition we can make is we can add rainbow delimiters, at least for editing Emacs Lisp buffers. So as you can see in Emacs, the language that we use for configuring Emacs is called Emacs Lisp. And don't be afraid of the word Lisp. Don't be afraid of the language Lisp. I mean, you may have heard that Lisp is lots of silly parentheses, but it's not really that hard to edit Lisp and Emacs, especially whenever you have the right packages involved. So for now, we're just going to start with the most basic thing, which is to use rainbow delimiters, which will make it a lot easier to see the nesting of the parentheses as you're editing this file. So let me grab this little snippet. And as you can see, it's a fairly simple snippet, thankfully. We just have to turn on the mode basically whenever we want it to be on. So I will drop down to the bottom here and add this snippet. And then Alex asks, what if the function is generated an environment variable denoting it's been defined or wrote to a file? Sure, you could do that, but it's a little bit overkill. I mean, you could just look at the variable itself whenever you are manipulating it to see if something's already there. But the problem is if you have an anonymous function, you may not know whether this is the same function or not. So if you've defined it as a variable, defining the function as a variable somewhere else, you could check for that. But yeah, it's tricky, but it's not something you should worry about too much. Once you get a little bit more used to doing Emacs configuration, this is not really a problem you run into very often, especially if you're using things like use package, which we see right here. That makes it easier to avoid these problems, at least in my experience. So we're going to use rainbow delimiters, and what you might see here is this little hook symbol, I suppose you could call it. In Emacs, this is called a keyword, and generally in Lisp languages, this type of syntax is called a keyword. So we have the hook keyword that is specifying that for anything that's prog mode, we want to run rainbow delimiters mode. So prog mode is the base mode of any programming language mode. So what this means when we set up this hook is that for any buffer that represents a programming language like a Lisp or a JavaScript or a Python or whatever, we're going to turn on this rainbow delimiters mode so we get the same functionality in any of those languages. If we wanted to, we could just make this specific to Emacs Lisp mode to only turn on rainbow delimiters mode there, but in my configuration, I have it set for all programming modes to turn this on. So if I were to go ahead and execute this, with ControlX, Control-E, we'll see that Melpa is downloading it. Since this buffer is already open, Rainbow Delimiters mode is not turned on, but I can run it myself, and we can see it activate. So now you can see the colors of the parentheses have now changed, and you can use them to see sort of like to match the parentheses that are relevant to each other here. Now with this particular theme, it's difficult to see because the colors have not enough contrast to be able to discern between them, and it may be kind of difficult to see on the stream. But with a different theme, you would probably have a better visibility into that. So that's kind of helpful for editing Emacs Lisp files. In future streams, I'll get more into helpful programming packages, especially things for editing Emacs Lisp, because if you're going to be doing that a lot, you kind of want to have a convenient way to do it. Okay, so that's another little basic thing that we can do. But what if we want to go a little bit deeper and make other things more helpful in Emacs? So I'm going to tell you about this package called WhichKey. And if you've ever tried SpaceMax before, and probably also Doom Emacs, I think this is pretty common for these, configuration-centric systems that are out there. WhichKey is a package that will give you a nice little panel pop up whenever you start typing a key binding to tell you what keys are available under that sort of key prefix. So I'll go ahead and go to the WhichKey page. And yeah, if you want to go check out more about this package, go to their GitHub repository because they have a pretty in-depth README. I don't think that they give a little screenshot here, but you've probably already seen me use it. So let's just turn it on for our configuration now and see what happens. So just to prove it to you that this is not doing anything right now, I'm gonna type ControlH, and you can see at the bottom that it says ControlH type question mark for further options. It doesn't really give us any extra information aside from that. So what we're gonna do is copy this WhichKey configuration over and paste it in. And I'm going to fix the indentation a little bit. And what we see here is that I'm going to use package WhichKey, and I'm going to use this init keyword. So there's a difference between what you might see, say, for instance, with this Ivy configuration. We have config Ivy mode 1. I actually think this is wrong. I'll fix it in a little bit. But the config and init are sort of two sides of what the kind of code that you want to run whenever this package gets installed and loaded. Init happens before before the package is loaded. So whenever use package gets called, if you have an init block, that will get run automatically every time, regardless of whether the package is getting loaded or not. This allows you to do some pre-configuration for the package, like setting variables, but it also allows you to invoke the mode itself, which is what we're doing here. We're basically saying anytime WhichKey gets loaded from use package, just immediately start it. For config, the config block only runs after the mode gets loaded. So I think what it's doing is it's attaching a hook to the mode so that whenever it loads up, it will run this configuration block to set variables. It may be doing it after the initial load. I'm not exactly sure, but if you check the use package documentation, it should tell you like what the sequencing is for that. So let's go ahead and run this. I'll explain this delay variable a little bit in a second. So it just installed WhichKey. So I'm going to hit ControlH now. And now we get this nice little panel at the bottom in the mini buffer that tells us all of the keys that ControlH makes available and all of the functions that get called as a result of all of these bindings. So before I was telling you that ControlHF will give you describe function. If you look in this panel here, you can see that F says describe function. So I've hit the ControlH prefix, and now it says that F in that prefix gives me describe function. Same thing for V. ControlHV gives you describe variable, and a lot of other things like describe mode, describe key, which is a really helpful one, and a lot of other stuff. I mean, a lot of these things I don't actually use. This really the describe functions that I use most often. So I'll hit Control-G to cancel that out. I think there's some other things that are nice about it. I wonder if it will tell me. So in general, it's good to know about the common Emacs prefixes. Another prefix that's very common, which you've probably seen me mention before, is ControlX. So if you hit ControlX, you'll see that there are a lot of commands in here. Some of them are related to window management. So if you hit ControlX0 or ControlX1, that can delete the current window or the other windows inside of the Emacs frame. Also some paging commands. Let's see, adjusting the text scale, opening DIRED, doing undo operations, and most importantly, like I think there's ControlX, Control-F, but it's not shown right now. Now, so we see there's Control-H, paging help. So sometimes you'll have a prefix that has a lot of key bindings set, and this tells us that we're seeing one of two down here at the very bottom of the screen. So if I hit Control-H, it tells me if I press N, it goes to the next page, P, previous page. So I'm going to press N to go to the next page. And now you'll see the rest of the key bindings that are available for this prefix. So now we can also see that Control-X, F. Control-X, Control-F is represented here. So you see that in the Control-X prefix, you also can press Control-F afterwards to go to find file. So also we can open files read-only, etc. All kinds of stuff like that. Control-X, Control-S is also important because it saves the buffer. So if you're used to editors that let you type Control-S, it doesn't work like that in Emacs. You have to type Control-X, Control-S instead. So that's pretty much it for the basics of WhichKey. The only other thing that's useful to note about WhichKey is that it has a configurable delay. So if you notice, I press Control-H, and then there's like a slight delay before it pops up. We can change that so that if, let's say for instance, you've gotten pretty comfortable with your Emacs key bindings and you don't want the panel to show up as frequently, like for instance, if you set the delay to 0, it will show up automatically every time as soon as you press a prefix. So if I was to change this delay to 0 and evaluate it with Control-X, Control-E, if I hit Control-H, it pops up immediately. Hi, Diamond Bond. If I was to change this to 1, then it will take 1 second before, well, it seems to take, okay, I think there's a thing that has to be done here. So if you change the idle delay, I believe that you have to actually restart WhichKey mode before you can see the results of that. So let me set this back to 0, and I will run WhichKey mode, which will toggle it. So you see in the bottom it says WhichKey mode disabled. Now if I hit Control-H, oh, it doesn't show up at all. Maybe that's what it does. If you set the delay to 0, it will disable it. And, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't re-enable the mode. Let's do that. WhichKey. All right, so WhichKey mode is enabled now. I'm gonna hit ControlH. All right, instant. It showed up instantly. Now if I set it to 1, I will run WhichKey mode again. And then to disable it, then I'll run it one more time. To re-enable it, and if I press ControlH, did I evaluate this? This is the problem with doing things live, folks. Sometimes you just make stupid mistakes. What we really need is the Ivy mode integration right now. No, it's on. Okay, I'll fix that in a second. Anyway, the idea there is that if you want the WhichKey pop-up to show immediately, you can set the delay value to 0, or if you want it to wait a little bit longer, like if you just don't want to see it unless you're like really stumped about what the binding is, then you can set it to like 1 second or 2 seconds so that it will show up later. That's kind of a useful thing to do. Diamond Bond asks how to reload from your configuration without restarting Emacs. Well, you do what I've basically been doing, which there's 2 things you can do, and I'll pull back up my buffer. Oh, now that's showing up. Yes, the LEM 101 says you can use MX evalBuffer to evaluate the whole buffer. Yes, that is true. I just killed my window again. The finger habits of an Emacs user. Sorry, the Vim user. So, yes, so we can run either evalBuffer, which will reevaluate everything in the buffer. However, I think this is not such a great idea to do because if you have any kind of imperative code that is manipulating variables or adding hooks, you might run it again, which would cause hooks to be run multiple times. So running evalBuffer can be less safe than going to a particular section of your config, and then if you go to the very last parenthesis of the function, you can just hit ControlX, Control-E to reevaluate. So I can just reevaluate this whole use package section. You can also, if you wanted to tweak certain things, you could set variables directly and then do it that way. So Diamond Bond says his configuration is, or their configuration is stored in an org mode file. So in an org file, I believe you can still do the same thing. I have my configuration in an org mode file as well, and I also use ControlX, Control-E inside of blocks. I think, though, that the block needs to be marked as an Emacs Lisp mode block so that you have access to the ControlX, Control-E binding to evaluate, but that's what I do. I just evaluate that. Generally, there's also 2 ways to do configuration with org mode files. One is you tell Emacs to just load in the file and evaluate all the tangled bits of it at startup. Another way to do it, which is the way that I do it, is that you have your org mode file, but you also have a separate init.el file that gets generated from that. And like on save, my org mode file gets turned into the init.el, and then I could go to the init.el and evaluate the whole thing if I wanted to. So there's a benefit to having that file be on the file system. So, so yeah, that gives us what we need to know about WhichKey for now. And it seems that my 1 second delay is working at the moment. But so that's helpful for figuring out what key bindings are set up. But there's other things we might need to know as well, especially when it comes to listing commands. So if I were to hit MX to get the full Emacs function list or interactive function list, you can see that I get a list of commands, and they all have names, which is great. You know, some of them are fairly descriptive, but I don't have any information about these at this moment, just at a glance. There is a package called ivyRich that will give you the details of all the commands whenever you're showing them in the list. And let me pull this page up real fast. So ivyRich is basically just an addition to the Ivy interface that will give you extra information for a few of the different built-in commands for Ivy, but it also will allow you to configure columns for any command that returns results through Ivy. So that can be kind of helpful if you really want to get deep into configuration. So as you can see in their customization section, we can configure like Ivy switch buffer, find file, MX, describe function, describe variable. There's a whole lot of stuff that you can set up transforms for. But I believe that by default, it will set up a lot of things for you. So what I'll do is just pull in ivyRich mode by itself, and we'll see where we go from there. So I'm not going to copy the rest of that configuration because I don't think I need it. All right, so I copied and pasted that bit, and I'm going to evaluate it. And now ivyRich mode should be on. And if I run Emacs, it doesn't show yet. So I wonder, let's see, CouncilMX. So in CouncilMX, which I need to bind correctly in a moment, we can see that we get this list of commands, and also we get the documentation string, or the primary documentation string for each command, which can be really helpful. So if I was to type like describe, you can see that describe font says it displays information about a font whose name is font name. So, oh, and the other nice thing about this is that it will tell you the key binding for that command as well. So if you're looking for how to do a certain thing, and you know what words you would use to describe it, you can open up CouncilMX with ivyRich and see all this extra information. Now this may be coming from Council itself. Let's actually check that out. Let me turn off ivyRich mode real quick. So I've disabled ivyRich mode. I'm gonna run CouncilMX. Okay, so yeah, by itself, CouncilMX does not give you key bindings, and it does not give you the documentation string. So let's go back and turn ivyRich back on, and then do CouncilMX. And now, once again, we get the key bindings and we get the documentation strings. This is super helpful. Like all the time, I'm benefiting from this information because it would just give you information about, like, in the buffer you're in. If there's a command that has a particular key binding, you'll know what the key binding is. You also know what the command does, etc. So since obviously we're not having those bindings set up by default for CouncilMX, etc., and we want to be able to get all the information, we need to set that up. In my own Emacs config, I have CouncilMX bound. Let me see here. Okay, this is the one. So what I'm going to do is grab this use package council. Council is already included, I believe, with the Ivy package, but you can still use package to configure a particular package even though it's already installed on the machine with some other package. So I'm using this section to configure bindings for council functions. So for instance, I want to use CouncilMX anytime that MX is hit. And for buffer switching, I also want to use CouncilIBuffer. And for find file, I want to use ControlX, or I want to use council find file whenever I press ControlX, Control-F. I'm also doing another thing here, which is kind of interesting, a function of use package, which is that for a given sort of a local key map for a particular buffer type, which in this case is the mini buffer. If I hit Control-R, I can pull up Council's mini buffer history. And I'll show that in a little bit because that's pretty useful. Another thing that I'd seen to be doing here, which I won't really go into at the moment because it's kind of a distraction. I may do another stream where I'm talking specifically about like tweaking Ivy to make it even better. But for now, let's just make things more simple. So I'm just going to run this little bit of config. Looks like Council got installed separately. That's interesting. Anyway, so now I'm going to hit MX. And MX is now bound to CouncilMX, which means we're getting all that nice information from ivyRich all the time we use MX. So I think that's, yeah. So let me do one more thing here. So another thing to know about Ivy, which is kind of helpful, is that you can hit Alt-O whenever you are in a list. So these are like extra actions that can be done on any item within a list that have to be defined for the particular function. So for CouncilMX, there are some extra actions defined. One of them is definition. So for list processes here, if I hit Alt-O, I can press D, and it gives me the definition of that function actually in the original elist file where this function is defined. So that could be a kind of helpful thing. This is something you should be aware of whenever you're using Ivy. There's usually an Alt-O binding that will give you some extra commands you can use. Let's see. Also, H for help will give you the help for the function. So if you, instead of like having to cancel out your query for commands and then use Control-H, F, and then look for the command name again, you can just get to it straight from here. If I just open that list, hit Alt-O, and then H for help, then it gives me that help buffer. So that's really helpful for getting help contextually whenever you're looking for something. So let me get back to the init buffer. Okay, so another thing that I want to show is another package that's very helpful, which is called helpful. So helpful is an augmentation to Emacs built-in help system, which gives you more details and a better formatted help screen so that you don't have to go digging around as much for information. It cross-links between other functions and variables for you. It tells you where a certain function or variable might be used in other eList files. It gives you the actual code for the eList function whenever you are looking at the help file. So it can be very useful for understanding things inside of your Emacs. We're at the GitHub repo right now where you can see a screenshot of this. And this is a package where you need to do a little bit of work to set up some bindings, because you need to replace the existing help functions with the helpful version of the describe function. So I'm going to go back to my own Emacs config and look for helpful. And I'm going to grab the stuff that's in here real quick and then paste it at the bottom of our buffer, of our init buffer. Okay, so I'll take out this. Well, actually, I'll describe ensure real fast after I finish formatting this. There's a couple things here that are useful to know. All right, so in this use package block for helpful, we're using ensure T. I think that I've already by default turned ensure on for all use package blocks. Yeah, you can see right here, I've got use package always ensure T on. But if you did not have that set, you would use ensure T to make sure that a use package will download the package dependency for you whenever you first use it. But in my case, since I've already got it turned on by default, I'm just going to remove that bit from here. Custom is another section that allows you to set the values of customizable variables. And variable customization is a thing that might be helpful if you weren't doing your configuration by hand, because there's a UI in Emacs for setting the values of variables, and it will store them in another eList file that gets managed by Emacs. Personally, I do not like that file. I always disable the functionality and make sure that that doesn't happen, because I want to have full control over what the variables are, and I want to make sure that it's checked into source control without any kind of mess. So to set those values in an easy way using use package, you can use this custom block where you just have basically key value pairs. And what we're doing here is we're setting the council describe function, which basically anytime council needs to use describe function or describe variable, we're telling it what function to call for that. So instead of calling the normal describe function, we're telling it to call helpful callable instead. That's a function. Also the same thing for the describe variable function. We're calling helpful variable instead. The next thing we see here is that we have a bindings block, but we're not saying what key is getting bound here at all. What we're doing instead is using this thing called remap. So in this case, what we're doing is remapping the key that already is bound to describe function, but we're changing the function that it's bound to. So this is really helpful if you already like a key binding that's set in Emacs. You just want to change what function that's being used. You can use remap to do that. So in this case, we're saying that for the mapping of describe function, which we know to be ControlHF, we're going to change that to use council describe function instead. I think the reason why I set this to council describe function is because you want that function list, and you want it to be given from council because it has all the extra information in it, instead of the helpful version of it. Because the helpful version would just give you like a basic prompt. Council describe function will give you like the whole Ivy based list, etc. And since we know that we've already configured council to use helpful callable, then we know that we'll get the helpful page whenever the function gets selected. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this with ControlX, Control-E. And now helpful has been loaded, and in theory, our bindings have been set. So I'm going to hit Control-H, Control-F. And now we see a list for describe function. Let's look for describe function. And I'm going to press enter. And now we're going to see this improved view inside of the help buffer, and we can see down here in the mode line that it's the helpful command buffer and not the normal describe buffer. We have some stuff about key bindings, so we know like in the different key maps what keys this function is bound to. We get documentation, we get a link to the manual. We get the actual code for the function. We see which file the function is defined in. We can enable debug or tracing for the function. We can do a lot of things here. So I find this to be extremely helpful, especially whenever I'm trying to write my own customizations or some eLisp code that does something specific. And I'm trying to find like where a certain function gets called, or like maybe what implementation details are in there. This is super helpful. Same thing for variables. So if I was to hit ControlHV, let's say package user dir. This is a variable I had to look up today. So package user dir is defined in blah, blah, blah. It tells you what the value is, the current value is. It tells you what the original value is as well, which can be helpful whenever you want to know what the default would be. It also tells you the documentation, and it tells you where this variable is referenced. So there's a lot of different places where this gets referenced in just the package.el package. And also it just gives you the source code, which is basically just like how it was defined, which can be useful sometimes because it will tell you like the variable type, the version in which it was introduced, etc. So helpful is a very useful package, and I think that's like pretty key if you are newer to Emacs and you really want to kind of ramp up your knowledge of the system. Whenever you're looking for functions or variables, it'll give you a lot of information that can be really helpful because it's, you know, the helpful package. Let's see, what else? We're basically getting to the end of what I had planned to do today. So if anyone has like comments or questions, please feel free to drop them in the live chat. Alex had asked, are all other helpful Emacs packages also called helpful so that we can easily find them? No. One of the, I guess, the joys and the dangers of the Emacs ecosystem is that there are a lot of helpful packages out there, and sometimes it's very hard to find ones that you want. I mean, you can always look on Google or on GitHub or on the Melpa website, but sometimes it's just a matter of like being in the right place at the right time, or like seeing the right Reddit thread and someone says something in the comments that points you to a really helpful package. So you just have to keep your eyes open. But generally, if you are kind of, you know, really into messing with Emacs configuration, you're probably searching around for these things anyway, and you know, your curiosity about a new package that you find will be overwhelming, and you'll sort of see what it does and figure out how it fits into your workflow. So that's generally been my experience. So one thing I wanted to do is, you know, just to kind of cap off this whole UI polish aspect, I wanted to pull in Doom Themes. Doom Themes is the... What did I just do? Oh, nice. That's great. So Doom Themes is the set of theme, or it's a package of themes that comes with Doom Emacs. So if you were to use Doom Emacs, you probably saw there's a lot of themes in there. They all come from this Doom Themes package. And it's got quite a lot of themes, and the nice thing about it is that they are very integrated into a variety of Emacs packages, so that the built-in Emacs themes are good for Emacs, like base Emacs, but they're not really set up well for like Magit or other more complicated UI-based packages. So if you go use Doom Themes, they'll have a more wide customization for different things you might use in Emacs, which can be really helpful. So if you go to their website, there's a lot of themes listed here, and there's also screenshots, I think. Yeah, see the screenshots. So you can kind of cruise through here and look for something that strikes your fancy. What we're going to do instead, though, is we're going to install it, and then we're going to use Council to walk through the themes and see which one would be looking nice for our streams. So let me see. Oh, we're on the wrong page here. I think it's just Doom Themes if I install it. If we install it manually, use package Doom Themes. If nil bold. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're just going to call use package Doom Themes. And I'll just pair this up with our existing Doom mode line that we have here. All right, so let's give that some space. I really need to get eval binding set up here in another stream because hard. Lean Bravo says Groovebox or death. Well, I'm not necessarily a fan of Groovebox, but we'll check it out and see how it looks. Okay, so here's one thing that you might see from time to time. Whenever you install a package, you might see some warnings pop up in a compile log panel or buffer. A lot of times you don't really have to pay attention to this because it's just some mess from the package itself. But if you ever run into an issue with a package after you've installed it, you might have to go look. I see here this says bytecode overflow. I don't know if that's an issue, but we're gonna find out if we can't load a package, load a theme correctly. So the command you want to use for this is council load theme. And this is gonna give you a list that lists all the themes that are available on your system. First name, last name says Nord is greater than Groovebox. Well, let's see. Let's see. It'd be nice if we had an ability to vote here, because then we would see who likes what. So if we wanted to follow Lean Bravo's suggestion and check out Groovebox, we can select Doom Groovebox from this list. And we see now we have a nice sort of autumny looking theme. It kind of reminds me of fall. It's got a lot of red in here, which to me is not so appealing. However, I do think that the contrast in this theme is effective for being able to see things well. If you're young, unlike me, I guess like a low contrast theme might look pretty cool. And if you want to see an example of a low contrast theme, let's check out Nord. It may be better in the Doom Emacs setup, but you can see that there is less contrast between the symbols here, and it makes it a little bit harder to read things at a glance. So it does look nice though. I mean, I like the sort of blue and green theme here. So yeah, I think that, you know, themes are very much a stylistic and aesthetic preference, but also there is some functional concern there as well about like whether it's readable and whether it highlights the right types of symbols for the language that you use. I have a JavaScript file that I'll try to load up here just to show a little bit of difference. But for instance, you can look at one buffer that's in eLisp and things look kind of cool. But then if you go to another type of buffer, it may look completely different and it might throw you off. Same thing for org mode. The org mode coloring can be weird sometimes. So let me drop that. ControlX, Control-F. I'm going to go into another project where I have some JavaScript. Okay, this is like minified or compiled JavaScript, so this is not real code. This is like compiled code. But anyway, the idea is that we can see that there are some more colors being represented here because there's more types of symbols. So, you know, this kind of thing can kind of sway you one way or the other based on your preferences. Like comparing that to the switch buffer. Comparing that to the eLisp buffer, the eLisp buffer looks a little less colorful because there's less symbols and syntax in Lisp than there is in JavaScript. So I don't know, this is a thing to kind of be looking out for whenever you're selecting themes. Lean Bravo says Gruden or Greduin Emacs theme Groovebox is pretty cool. 3 styles for dark and light themes. Yeah, there's so many themes packages out in the world for Emacs. I believe there's a good site for that called, well, we're just gonna search for it because I don't remember what it's called, but it's Emacs Themes something. Okay, EmacsThemes.com. So this is a GNU Emacs Themes gallery, which basically will give you screenshots for a variety of different Emacs themes. I used to use this site, but I kind of find that a lot of the themes here are not really to my quality expectations. So you should definitely go cruise through it one day if you want to just look for themes, but I wouldn't have high hopes that you're going to find like the perfect theme here. Another way you can find themes would be to search on Melpa. Like if you were to go list packages, you can search through this list for, let's see, let's go Swiper. Anything called theme, and you can kind of, you know, jump through all of these and see what themes are here. And then if you see one that you might like, you can press enter, and it'll give you some details on where the repo is. And usually you can go to a repo and it will tell you, or give you like a screenshot of the theme, like in this case, which that theme is kind of gray. I know that's pretty depressing. This theme to me reminds me a lot of Seattle. So if you like Seattle, maybe you'll like this theme, but for me, no thanks. Okay, Abdullah says check PeachMelpa. I've not heard of that one. Let's see if we can find that one real fast. Peach, not here. Okay, so PeachMelpa Emacs. PeachMelpa, oh, okay, cool. Great, yeah, this is a great suggestion. I don't think I knew about this site, but this is another theme listing site, and just at first glance, I I like what I'm seeing a lot better. So maybe this is a more modern iteration of Emacs Themes that has better themes lists. So thank you, Abdullah Assad, for that suggestion. I did not know about this site. So yeah, definitely check out peach-melpa.org. Okay, so let's see. Let's just check out another little theme here. Just something for fun. We can check out Dracula. Dracula has a lot more contrast than other themes, but the colors are a little bit neon and wild, so maybe it's not really something that you would want to use. I think that one that I liked was Tomorrow Night. I think the contrast is kind of low, but it's one of these themes that if you like to use your computer in a dark room, this could save your eyes because it's not very bright. However, as soon as you switch to a browser buffer, you're going to be blinded, so be careful of that. As you can see in my own configuration, I am using, let's see, is it Pale Night? Yeah, I personally use Doom Pale Night as my theme. I don't know, I just kind of like the sort of bluish purplish vibe with some greens thrown in. It works for me and my aesthetic. So anyway, that's basically what you can do for themes. Let's set one for the default. I don't know. There's so many themes here. It'd be kind of a waste of time to go through all of them. But let's see. Let's just go with Groovebox for now because that was the first suggestion from Lean Bravo. And then if anybody doesn't like that, they can switch it in their own iteration. I think once again I managed to suspend Emacs. And I don't know how to get back to it, so let's just go restart it. And let's see if it will let me pull up what I have been editing. Yeah. What just happened? Is it because it's suspended? All right, let's figure this out right now. Emacs resume from suspend. If anybody knows how to do this, let me know. Suspending Emacs. Suspend. I feel like, let me look at my own configuration. ControlHK. I'm gonna use ControlHK to check what Control-Z is bound to. So for me, it's something different because I'm using evil mode, but I think Control-Z must be set to some kind of suspend because it just totally died as soon as I tried to run that buffer. In fact, let's look. Emacs. Nope, it's not running. Anyway, I think that's a waste of time at this point, but suffice it to say, I think we made some good progress today configuring Emacs to be more helpful. And I think next time what we might focus more on is probably key bindings. We might cover evil mode and sort of like learning a little bit more about how to deal with key bindings effectively. I mean, we did go into that a little bit in this stream with WhichKey, etc. But key bindings are very important in Emacs just because you're using your computer the whole time, or sorry, your keyboard the whole time when you're in it. And the more that you focus on key bindings and less on using the mouse, the better off you're going to be. So there are some cool packages you can use for quick navigation in Emacs, in buffers and inside of buffers or between windows, etc. And we might look into some of those things. And then in the later stream, we'll get into stuff about like, you know, programming modes, etc., language server mode, etc. Those kinds of things can be helpful for development, but we'll wait a little bit before that because we still have some general productivity stuff that we can get into first. So I think that's where we can call the stream for the day. Thanks so much, everybody, for showing up. I really appreciate your support and your comments in the live chat. If you're watching the recording of this, please feel free to leave a comment below to ask questions or make suggestions for the future streams. And definitely hit the subscribe button and click the bell so that you get all notifications for whenever I go live the next time. If you don't hit the bell, you probably won't be notified for live streams. So it's good to have that set up so that you know when we're going to go live. I believe the next stream is going to be this Friday at around 9 to 9:15 a.m. Pacific time, just like today. I think Mondays and Fridays will be the days that I'll be streaming. So just be on the lookout for that for the next stream. And until then, thanks a lot for joining and happy hacking. See you next time.